Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the event today, the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules. We are happy to see all of you in this meeting today. Ambassador Skimet Bremer, the co-chair of the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules and program director, executive director of the UNODC, Madam Kadawali, members of the group of friends, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Van Zijlsmit, and another panelist from the UNODC from Uganda, colleagues from the Secretariat, welcome. I'm honored to welcome you both virtually and in person to this meeting of the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules. I wish to extend the group's warm welcome to the Executive Director, Madam Kadawali, and thank her for her tireless efforts in encouraging members to implement the United Nations standards and norms on crime prevention and criminal justice. These standards and norms remain a critical asset in the work of the UNODC. However, today, the Nelson Mandela International Day on 18 July is an annual celebration of the legacy of the first president of a free and democratic South Africa, marking his vast contribution to multilateral diplomacy, especially in the field of human rights. It will be recalled that this day was declared Nelson Mandela International Day in accordance with the UN General Assembly Resolution 64/13. The significance of this day was further enhanced following General Assembly Resolution 70/175, which adopted the revised UN standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners and renamed them in honor of this great leader and humanitarian. I look forward to the sharing of good lessons and challenges experienced in the practical implementation of the Nelson Mandela Rules to help build a humane prison system that treats prisoners with dignity. On behalf of the co-chair, Ambassador Skimet Bremer, I take this opportunity to warmly invite you to engage and afterwards attend a small reception for refreshments just outside here. Thank you very much. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, my esteemed co-chair and colleague, Ambassador Monikani. I guess everybody here can feel the personal attachment of you to Nelson Mandela. You fought for him being freed. And whereas I cannot boast such a CV in this context, I take a personal pride in co-chairing here with you on this day our event. For me, Nelson Mandela was one of the most outstanding personalities in the last century. And I'm glad that we honor this, well, I'm a lawyer, but nevertheless, quite legalistic and cumbersome title of standard minimum rules just in this personality, in the Nelson Mandela Rules. After these personal remarks, Excellencies, dear friend, and a special warmly welcome to UNODC's Executive Director and as head of UN Vienna Under Secretary General Radawali, who has accepted our invitation again to join our meeting personally, a proof of the importance that she and her office at large afford to the issue of prison and penal reform. I extend a renewed welcome to all distinguished participants and panelists to today's meeting of the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules, and sincerely appreciate the fact that after many virtual events, the group can finally convene again in person. But I also welcome all participants that have joined us online and that will, thanks to the Secretariat, be able to follow our consultations live via NODC webcast. Please be informed, this event will be recorded. The Nelson Mandela International Day. Is there a better day to recall the objectives of our group, namely to promote the practical application of the Mandela rules worldwide, to facilitate expert discussions on priority aspects related to prison management and reforms, and third, to support the technical assistance delivered by UNODC on addressing global prison challenges. Let me now introduce our proposed agenda of the meeting, which has been circulated prior to the meeting and that you'll have, hopefully, in front of you. We will focus on launching new guidance material developed by UNODC, but we'll also showcase how UNODC works towards translating the Nelson Mandela rules into actual practice on the ground. Can I consider this agenda adopted, absent any motions of opposite? So decided. As per usual practice, permanent missions will be invited to contribute to the meeting under agenda item 7, and I take a special pleasure to indicate that some of states are to announce an intention to join the group of friends. As the last in-person meeting of the group dates back to 2019, I suggest that we all watch a short introductory video on the Nelson Mandela rules to refresh our memories. This track was produced by our key partner in ODC, namely the Prison and Penal Reform Team in the Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice section. Excuse me.
Prisons are closed settings. We often forget about those who live and work there. How we treat persons who are detained is very important, though. It mirrors our understanding of safety, justice, and human dignity for all members of our societies, including those in conflict with the law. The United Nations have always paid attention to the plight of prisoners. Already back in 1955, UN member states agreed to the standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. But this was a long time ago, and a lot has happened since. In 2015, following 4 years of negotiations among diplomats and prison experts from all over the world, the UN General Assembly unanimously adopted an update version of the rules, now known as the Nelson Mandela Rules. Today, these rules represent the universally acknowledged blueprint for prison management in the 21st century. They outline minimum prison conditions, provide guidance, and set clear benchmarks for prison staff on how to ensure safety, security, and the humane treatment of prisoners. Let's remind ourselves that the closed environment of prisons creates vulnerabilities and a potential risk of abuse. The Nelson Mandela Rules therefore establish important safeguards for prisoners. For example, regular inspections of prisons by independent bodies must take place, including unrestricted access to all prisoners and the possibility to talk to them in full confidentiality. Furthermore, the Nelson Mandela Rules require that prisoners can engage in constructive activities and programs, and that they can be in continued contact with their families and friends, including through regular visits. Finally, let's also not forget the important work of prison staff, a demanding profession that is often under-recognized. The Nelson Mandela Rules give detailed guidance for tailored training for prison officers and recognize their work as a social service of great importance. As the custodian of the Nelson Mandela Rules, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime champions the promotion of the rules worldwide. Its guidance material and technical assistance projects with prison and correctional services across the globe all aim at turning the Nelson Mandela Rules into actual practice for the benefit of prisoners, prison staff, and our societies at large. To learn more about the Nelson Mandela Rules, visit our website and join our efforts to leave no one behind.
Thank you for your attention. And with this introductory to recall, to remind what it is about. Now I'd like to underline once again that it is an immense pleasure to give the floor to UNODC's Executive Director, Ms. Radha Wali, who despite her busy schedule is with us today and agreed to address our group with a keynote intervention. Secretary, yes, the floor.
Thank you very much, distinguished co-chairs, Ambassador Molikani, Ambassador Schmidt-Breme, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today to address in person the group of Friends of the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, the Nelson Mandela Rules, and to honor the legacy of Nelson Mandela. After spending more than a quarter of a century behind bars, Nelson Mandela said that the way that a society treats its prisoners is one of the sharpest reflections of its character. As this group convenes in person for the first time since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is the right time to reflect on the world's prison population and over 11 million people who have suffered the impact of the pandemic greatly. In a world where prison conditions were already too often below the standard required by the Mandela Rules, the pandemic deepened the cracks. In particular, the crisis underlined the problem of prison overcrowding in many countries. It is estimated that the majority of countries are operating prisons above their maximum capacity. Even before the pandemic, overcrowding was a driver of conflict and violence in prisons and an obstacle to proper nutrition, health and hygiene, as well as rehabilitation and care. These factors contributed greatly to the rapid spread of the virus inside prisons. Data gathered by Justice Project Pakistan, an NGO, found that at least 612,000 prisoners have been infected with COVID-19 in 122 countries. Thousands are reported to have died. At the same time, measures to contain the spread of the virus have taken a severe toll on the mental health and well-being of prisoners, as well as on prison staff. Restrictions on meaningful human contact and constructive engagement with prisoners are contrary to the Mandela Rules. While these restrictions were enacted as an emergency measures in response to an unprecedented health crisis, they should not become the new normal. The economic consequences of the pandemic and other crises have also strained national budgets, threatening to reduce the resources allocated to prisons. Prisons are already underfunded and unprioritized in many countries. Insufficient resources can mean a lack of access to things as basic as nutrition and medication. The lesson of the pandemic should not be to forego adequate prison environments and practices. It should instead be to recognize that many prison systems are not well equipped for their demanding tasks, and to address long-standing deficiencies in policy, budget, infrastructure, and management systems. COVID is a wake-up call, an opportunity to recommit to the Mandela Rules and to the principles that drove the General Assembly to adopt them. Excellencies, our prisons say much about who we are and what we want to achieve. Prisons are meant to be places of justice and rehabilitation. They are not tools to inflict suffering, nor to strip people of their humanity. We all know that the vast majority of prisoners will eventually return to their communities. Experience has shown time and again that crime and violence can be cyclical, especially when we neglect root causes of offending and deny people second chances. Inhumane and dysfunctional prisons do not leave our societies any safer from violence and crime. In contrast, rehabilitative prison environments help social cohesion and reduce reoffending. That is the heart of the Nelson Mandela Rules. The rules provide a universal blueprint for humane prison conditions and effective prison management that safeguard the fundamental human rights of prisoners. Member states should look to live up to the Mandela Rules in their letter, but also in their spirit and the spirit of the man whose name they carry. That spirit extends beyond the provisions of the rules to the approach that countries take to imprisonment and their commitment to other relevant UN standards. It starts with an awareness of who is occupying our prisons. The majority of prisoners worldwide come from disadvantaged and marginalized backgrounds. Many of them are charged with petty and non-violent offenses. Many are yet to be sentenced. Data gathered by UNODC reveals that in the period from 2000 to 2019, the percentage of unsentenced prisoners remained between 29 and 31% globally. This is too high. Alternatives to incarceration should be more seriously considered in appropriate cases, in line with the Tokyo rules on non-custodial measures. Gender-sensitive prison management is crucial, guided by the Bangkok rules on the treatment of women prisoners. Women continue to face their own unique challenges behind bars, and prisons in many countries do not have the capacities to address those challenges. Prisons, facilities, and programs need to meet the particular healthcare requirements of women, as well as the needs of pregnant women, nursing mothers, and women prisoners with children. Gender-specific non-custodial measures should also be considered, taking into account the backgrounds of women offenders, many of whom have been victims themselves. Another essential component of a functioning prison system is the support provided to prison staff. Countries need to value their important work and invest more in building their capacities. Taking a closer look at our prisons, their populations, and their staff is a pathway to true justice, as envisioned by the Nelson Mandela Rule. This group of friends and all of its 34 members are playing a crucial role in promoting the effective application of the Mandela Rules around the world through your political support and in-kind contributions. As the custodian of the Nelson Mandela Rules and the other standards I mentioned, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime is hard at work generating positive change in prison systems. In 2021-2022, amidst COVID, UNODC provided technical assistance and advisory services on prison-related challenges to more than 40 member states. We have also produced extensive technical guidance on prison reform, including more than 20 handbooks, training curricula, and other tools. Last year, our office worked with DPO and OHCHR to develop a UN system common position on incarceration. I was very proud to present that common position to a high-level meeting of this group of friends at the 30th Crime Commission. We will continue to use the common position as a platform to promote the Mandela Rules and provide focused and coordinated UN support on prison reform. In this regard, I welcome the CCPCJ's recent resolution tasking UNODC to convene an intergovernmental expert group to develop model strategies on reducing reoffending. Looking forward, I hope to see more countries join this group of friends, and I invite the co-chairs to continue to their good efforts to expand its membership. UNODC will seek to step up our efforts to inform member states about the Mandela Rules and to promote their implementation more widely and effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, when we commit to leaving no one behind, we must mean what we say. Many of those who are incarcerated have done great wrong, but all of them, without exception, are human beings. The humane approach to prisons preserves the humanity of those who are on either side of the bars. Despite his long years in prison, Nelson Mandela never lost his humanity, and he went on to change the course of history. Let us honor his life by making sure that prisons around the world are equipped to contribute to a lasting peace in our communities, rooted in justice and human dignity for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Marley, for this highly relevant point and your emphasis on the systematic deficiencies that COVID-19 has put to the spotlight, and for your call to recommit to the Nelson Mandela Rules as we build back from pandemic and to scrutinize our approach to imprisonment from an angle of justice and human dignity. And as you added, the way how the states treat their detainees is not only a mirror, it's a focus on how they respect the weaker part, the unfavored. It's a gender question, as you mentioned it. We appreciate in this regard that today's meeting of the group of friends is embedded in a global awareness-raising campaign with the title #Dignity Unlocked, which UNODC has launched to sensitize the general public and policymakers alike, where we all should have a vested interest in the Nelson Mandela Rules and human dignity in prisons. Be assured, we stay committed. I'm pleased now to give the floor to Mr. Philipp Meissner, Interregional Advisor and Focal Point for Prison and Penal Reforms in the Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Section, who will provide us with an update from the Secretariat and share how relentlessly UNODC is working towards guiding us on how to translate the Nelson Mandela rules into actual prison practice. Please, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Mr. Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues. After this thought-provoking keynote intervention from our Executive Director, let me also say on our behalf that it's a great pleasure to see the group of friends convening in person again. It has been a long time. But it's also a great privilege to officially launch on this special day UNODC's consolidated set of resources on the Nelson Mandela rules. Before doing so, however, please allow me to briefly take a step back, as I would like to showcase how closely linked our work on this material is to what the Crime Commission and General Assembly actually requested UNODC to do when the Nelson Mandela rules were adopted in 2015, followed by a renewed call to promote their practical application 2 years later. In response to this request you see on the screen, we have invested heavily ever since in not only spreading the word about the Nelson Mandela rules, but also in translating these rules into practice-oriented and carefully tailored guidance material. All of this, obviously, as part of an effort to move these rules as closely as possible to prison practitioners and other relevant stakeholders, as well as, secondly, to further establish these rules as a core foundation of UNODC's technical assistance on the ground. So what you have in front of you, at least those who are attending this meeting in person, is the result of these efforts of various years, namely a dedicated toolkit on the Nelson Mandela rules, which complements our range of technical guidance on prison and penal reform our Executive Director has already referred to. As you can see, the content of the toolkit, once you open it, approaches the Nelson Mandela rules from different angles, namely from a perspective of, first of all, sensitization and illustration. Secondly, from a perspective of assessing compliance with the rules. Thirdly, from a perspective of prison staff training, something that UNODC feels very strongly about. And finally, from a perspective of prison legislation. Now, starting with the upper left-hand side, you will see and find in the toolkit various leaflets and instructional placards that provide for a user-friendly introduction to both the background and content of the rules with a focus on its updated provisions. Let's recall that the Nelson Mandela rules are an update version of what was already adopted back in the 1950s. Moving on to the upper right-hand side, you will see UNODC's much more detailed checklist for prison inspection mechanisms that breaks down the Nelson Mandela rules into 240 indicators with different chapters on all core areas of prison management, be it related to safeguards, material conditions, safety and discipline, rehabilitation, etc. The obvious core question being here, how can a prison administration continuously assess where they stand in terms of performing against the Nelson Mandela rules? Thirdly, and quite a success story in UNODC, our e-learning course on the Nelson Mandela rules, which includes interactive videos which we filmed in prisons in Algeria, Argentina, and Switzerland, and which received an excellence award from the International Corrections and Prisons Association, has been explicitly designed for prison staff. The objective here being obviously to focus and foster ownership amongst prison practitioners, as we all know that it is on their buy-in that the practical application of the Nelson Mandela rules depends to a large extent. Finally, we also considered the issue of penitentiary legislation in the form of a Model Prison Act in order to give justice to the fact that prisons are highly regulated environments, right? Hence the need for sound and updated prison legislation at national level. This is a most recent addition to our toolkit, and we have the pleasure to have the main author of this new publication with us today. I would like to reiterate that all of this content was obviously developed in close cooperation with a broad range of practitioners and other experts. And I'm also very pleased that thanks to the support of our donors, in this case the co-chairs of this very group, we were able to publish all of its content not only in English but also in French, Spanish, Arabic and Russian in order to maximize our global reach and to give meaning to the concept of multilingualism. Now, you may ask how all of this content is perceived on the ground and whether national authorities are actually receptive to making use of this material, also given that the Nelson Mandela rules are not legally binding. My short answer on this screen would be not to underestimate the standing of the Nelson Mandela rules of what is universally acknowledged as minimum standards for prison management and the treatment of prisoners, obviously coupled with their sibling, the Bangkok rules on gender-responsive offender management. Admittedly, we all know it's a long path from intergovernmental consultations and standard setting all the way to a shift in policy and practice on the ground. But I would dare to make a point that the Nelson Mandela rules, coupled with the content of this toolkit, have contributed to important progress on this journey. Prison authorities and others involved in offender management are not only aware of the rules, which are by now, just to let you know, available in more than 20 languages, but they also acknowledge the rules as a core benchmark in their reform efforts. More than 77,000 prison practitioners from 160 countries have enrolled in UNODC's e-learning course, which has been rendered an obligatory component of prison staff training curricula in an increasing number of countries. In selected cases, even national courts have started to refer to the Nelson Mandela rules as a supplementary source when considering applicable standards at international level. Now, as you can see, the Nelson Mandela Rules Toolkit is now firmly integrated in our technical assistance on prison and penal reform, currently amounting to an overall portfolio of around $70 million in 40 member states. And I'm pleased to share with you, and I think it's an important point, that UNODC enjoys high credibility amongst national prison authorities, also as a result of our combined expertise in different parts of UNODC on prison management, prison health, as well as prison-related research. At the same time, and our executive director has been referring to it, let there be no doubt that in many prisons around the world, the situation remains dire, and we often struggle to mobilize the required resources we would need to respond to requests we receive from other countries. We could and we should do so much more. What we also need to continuously keep in mind is that many challenges that actually manifest in prisons and that pose massive obstacles to the practical application of the rules are a way beyond the control of prison services. Think of overcrowding, think of prolonged pretrial detention, think of obstacles that prisoners may encounter upon release. Hence our strategic approach in UNODC to not limit ourselves to prison reform work in the narrow sense, but to also address delays in the administration of justice, to assist in reducing the scope of imprisonment, and to foster social reintegration prospects of offenders. As such, and just some brief words about success stories in UNODC, these are, when it comes to prison and penal reform, quite multifaceted. They may include the ongoing release of 5,000 petty offenders from prisons to community services in Kenya that followed an upscaling of the probation and aftercare service. As much as such success stories may include the inauguration of a training and research center on the Nelson Mandela rules in Kazakhstan to provide tailored training for prison staff. Success stories may include the extensive upgrading of prison infrastructure in Kenya, Nigeria, and Somalia to improve prison conditions, as much as they may include extensive capacity building for the Department of Community-Based Corrections in Sri Lanka to foster the use of non-custodial measures. We are convinced in UNODC that it is only through such a holistic approach that we can reach sustainable impact, coupling investments in prison conditions and prison management with parallel efforts to relieve the excessive pressure from which prison services continue to suffer. Let me therefore conclude my presentation by reiterating the notion from our executive director earlier on, that living up to the spirit of the Nelson Mandela rules will also mean to scrutinize our overall approach to incarceration. It is our sincere hope that with your support in the group of friends, the need for sound and evidence-based prison and offender management will become an even more important topic on the agenda of our two commissions and remain an integral part of UNODC's overall mandate. In our view, this would lead us a long way in generating important benefits for justice and fundamental rights, for security, public safety, as well as for our efforts to ensure that, as per our social media awareness raising campaign, that human dignity remains unlocked. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Meissner, for this update and for introducing us to what I consider a very impressive toolkit of the Nelson Mandela rules. And you addressed it shortly together with South Africa. We are proud to have supported the developing of this comprehensive toolkit, which will foster ownership and be of great practical value for prison services and other relevant parties to move from theory to the practical application of the rules. Please, may I ask you now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Dirk van Ziel-Smit, Emeritus Professor of the University of Cape Town, where he served as Professor of Criminology and Dean of the Faculty of Law. And I understand he's also Emeritus Professor of the Comparative International Penal Law of the University of Nottingham. Please, Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Indeed, thank you both. You can see I'm not a professional here. Thank you, Ambassador, for the introduction, and thank you also to the South African Ambassador. I just want to say to both of you that this is an exceptional honor for me to be here, and that your countries have contributed in a unique way to make it possible. And I want to explain that a bit because it's a good introduction to the rules. One of the biggest events in my career was that in 1995, I was asked by the new Mandela government to write the text for a new legal framework for prisons in a new democratic South Africa. I could really sit down with a clean sheet of paper and try and think in terms of fundamental principles about what eventually became the 1998 Correctional Services Act in South Africa. As a South African, I've always been deeply grateful for this opportunity. But the Germans come into it too, Ambassador, because shortly prior to this, I had been a fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and had twice spent a full year at the Max Planck Institute in Freiburg thinking about this. And I really sat there, had the time, the facilities to think, what would an ideal prison legal system look like? And Germany, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, until the 1970s, had no clear framework for its prison laws. But like a good constitutional democracy, it was realized that this was needed. The Constitutional Court essentially told the government, go out and introduce proper prison law. And in 1976, they came up with the Strafvollzugsgesetz, which has remained a model to the world. So I'm deeply thankful to this. And I suppose the links go even further because I'm described as the primary author of this document, but I could only write it because I had such excellent colleagues at the UNODC to work with. It's really the final draft, which became the document you see, is really the work of a triumvirate, myself, Philip Meissner, and a third colleague, Christoph Capelle, to whom I'm deeply grateful. And then we did have a group of national experts from around the world to review what we were doing. So it works from being the thoughts of an individual to being something wider and, we hope, more influential. So to turn to the substance. What or why rather, should one change national prison law? And the first answer that I could give if I think about this is that law gives explicit authority to what we're trying to do. Good prison law starts with making explicit the underlying principles. Human dignity, as Phillips mentioned, is really what we need to emphasize, and you see that, like the Mandela rules, our draft begins by emphasizing that in its first section. But you have to go a bit further. You have to spell out what the means are by which these things can be achieved, and by clarifying the standards that must be met in law. The Nelson Mandela rules embody developments that should be in national law. They build on international human rights law, they build on international penological standards, they build on the world's best knowledge of penological practice. But it needs this further step to convert them into law and to make them really matter. Now, the question is, how does one change national prison law? And the new handbook provides specific legal provisions that can be introduced to reflect what's already in the Nelson Mandela rules. And you can use the handbook to text the national law most countries in the world, probably all countries in the world, already have against this text. You can consider the overall structure of what you have in its scope. Most of the rules in the Nelson Mandela rules apply to all prisoners, awaiting trial and sentenced. And you need to think, have you covered all of their positions sufficiently? The law enables you to spell out general purposes and principles as interpretive tools. You want them at the beginning so that people who read them can say, how do I interpret something very specific that we are expected to do? And then two small things from a law professor. Definitions matter. We all say we gain solitary confinement, but what do we really mean when we say solitary confinement? Spell it out in law and you will know. Spell it out in law and your officials will know what they can and cannot do. And then delegated powers matter. Most systems of prison law have a general provision which says the minister can do the following and can delegate powers to the head of the prison service, and the head of the prison service can delegate them further. If you don't spell those out precisely, you leave open the possibility of abuse. This handbook gives you an indication of how that can be avoided. Now, you need specific changes, or to consider specific changes in international, I've got far too quickly. You need specific changes in national prison law. I was hesitating about which of these to point to, but let me give you just a few examples. The draft law spells out a set of rules dealing with admissions and release. Why? Because we know it's in those areas that abuse can happen most easily. The draft law spells out rules relating to accommodation. Why? Because accommodation is one of the areas in which human dignity is often abused the most. Nobody can live in a dignified way in 2 square meters, but give prisoners more space, reduce overcrowding, and you can get somewhere. You need clear rules to tell your authorities what is acceptable. Healthcare. Old laws say appoint a doctor. Of course you need a doctor to have access to a prison. The important thing, though, is to know what the doctor must do. Prisoners have clear rights to healthcare. That should be spelled out. The mechanisms can follow. Freedom of religion is important, I mentioned. And then safety, security, and discipline. Very important questions. This is not some utopia we're sketching, but clear provisions, clear restrictions in that regard are crucial for a proper legal framework which respects the principles of rehabilitation. And then sentenced prisoners, particularly, have a right to not only rehabilitation, but to the development of self-respect. All these things are vital, and the law won't solve all your problems, but will give you a framework to enable this to be done. On the penultimate slide, I list more examples of safeguards that you may want to build in. They're important too: inspections, filing systems, access to legal aid, complaints, and so on. But the important thing really is this. You need to set up a structure for your prison service, but the structure must not be the main thing. It must be subordinate to the overall purposes and objectives which need to be spelled out clearly. I hope this handbook will go a long way to assisting people around the world in reaching these standards, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor, for your elaborate and thought-provoking presentation. And you were maybe a little bit too modest to underline it, but we are very glad for today's discussion, be it here or later at the reception, for a closer exchange. You being the main author of the most recent element of the Nelson Mandela Rules Toolkit, namely the Model Prison Act and related commentary, and if I may add it, as former head of the Division for International Criminal Law, with contacts to the Freiburg Institute, your name sounds a bell and a positive one. Now I give the floor to our final speaker, Ms. Sharon Nyambi, who is the head of UNODC's program office in Uganda. And I ask her to share with us how UNODC working to generate tangible positive change and impact on the ground, namely through its field-based technical assistance programs. The floor is yours.
The co-chairs, the ambassadors, your excellencies, distinguished members of the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules, and of course, distinguished participants. My participation today is really to give a testament on whether the Nelson Mandela Rules are applicable, possible. 2 years ago, we were graciously invited by the Ugandan government to establish an office in Uganda, right in the depth of COVID. And so I applaud the government of Uganda, who is represented online through Ms. Nyakato, and to work with you to share our experiences on how we've been able to do this. We also have some very good achievements through cross-cutting issues relating to COVID and gender. And so the question that many of you may have, as much as we have these policy guidelines and normative assurance, is how does this look like in the field? So it's really an honor for me to really give you this insight. And so we hope that you will have a practical experience to share with your governments. The outline is quite detailed, but I think it's very important for us to understand the context within which we were able to make these great milestones. Uganda, like many other countries, has quite a professional prison service institution, but it's also facing many challenges. With 254 prisons, the current capacity is at 19,000, a little bit over 19,000. But we have a prison population of close to 69,000. So in essence, you understand and appreciate that the success we showcase today is really in the context of very challenging circumstances. You also note that when you look at female representation, as much as it's represented at 4.5, this is really in an excess of female prison population increasing in the country and the challenging issues around the gender dynamic. We have learned that the issue of pretrial detention is an issue. In Uganda, we are at 52% of the prison population being on pretrial. That's a big issue, and you'll understand why some of the success that we showcase today is really anchored on focusing on pretrial detention. Uganda has the second youngest population in the world. So what we see in prison is an overrepresentation of a very young population. As you'll see, we have 17% of the prison population really below the age of 21 and 66% between the age of 24 and 25. Our focus and journey with Uganda Prison Service when we look at prison reform is really anchored to respond to those 4 areas. How do we deal with this growing number of people who remain on pretrial detention? How do we look at the aspect of prison management? How do you have a professional staff and manage an overcrowded prison facility? How do you leverage on some of the positives? What alternative measures exist? And how do we plan for social reintegration? So understanding this context will really give you insight on what and why these have been selected. When you look at pretrial detention, it was very important for us in Uganda to ensure that we looked at the criminal justice chain. And UNODC, partnering with the justice law and order sector, was able to support key interventions looking at how do we work with the Director of Public Prosecutions to ensure that that mere decision to charge is really anchored on decisive measures that do not clog the system. We helped and supported the development of their 5th strategic plan and the launch. And within that plan, having the Director of Public Prosecutions attest to the fact that they will commit to review cases and ensure that only sound cases pass through the criminal justice system and actually get the necessary conviction. We've partnered with the Human Rights Commission, and the idea is really strengthening internal and external oversight mechanisms. And working in the context of Uganda, the Human Rights Commission has the privilege to monitor all places of detention. And this is important when you have a Human Rights Commission that's willing to partner with the criminal justice system and enhance gaps that makes it quite possible. Within the frame of our support to the Ugandan government, in partnership with civil society, we managed to launch a prison decongestion project, focusing on 6 high-volume prisons where we noticed that there were a lot of cases on pretrial detention in comparison to the general outlook, and to consider possibilities of getting some of the minor cases phased out of the system. This has been quite helpful, and we note that it is extremely appreciated in as far as prison management is concerned. We have focused our attention on enhancing safety and security and looking at the risk and needs assessment, of course, within the context of a challenging structure. But we have been able to openly sit at the table with the Ugandan government. We have contributed to the development of the policy framework on prison intelligence. Capacity building has been a strong component of our work in Uganda. We've developed tools. These tools are well integrated in the Prison Academy and Training School basic training curricula, so way far beyond the support that bilateral partners or multilaterals like ourselves can provide. The system continues to ensure that staff that join the prison service has the capacity to work around the key issues. Within these past 2 years, we managed to develop modules that focus on preventing and countering violent extremism due to our geopolitical positioning. We managed to integrate the Nelson Mandela rules in the training basic curricula, and we have 97 instructors who've already undertaken the prison course. With the current status of the congestion in prison settings, classification is a problem. But still, the Ugandan government, through the Uganda Prison Service, have managed to attest to the fact that they're willing to start and pilot. And we did manage in these 2 years to develop the risk and needs assessment tool that I'm happy to report will be piloted in 6 prisons. And those tools require that we support the prison facilities with the IT equipment and furniture to facilitate this development. And we trained 100 prison staff on classification. We've undertaken an ambitious resource mobilization strategy. Why? Because the government of Uganda approached UNODC and requested that we walk with them on their new journey to really move from a penal institution to a correctional model. So the government has invested in providing a holistic approach to corrections, and UNODC is currently supporting the development of this policy, and now we are seeking resources to support the government to operationalize this strategy. This is already indicative of a government that's willing to enhance its prison reform agenda. But for UNODC, it also assists us to learn that within a frame of really challenging times, governments can still aspire to comply with the Nelson Mandela rules. When we talk about social reintegration, the issue is always how do we work with the vulnerable groups that find themselves in conflict with the law and end up in prison. And this is where we've invested enhancing the social rehabilitation and reintegration department. We are currently helping in developing policy documents and handbooks that will strive to enhance the work of this department. But we are also looking at working with correctional services on how to partner with the private sector to brand the products that we see the prison community, both male and female, are engaging in the prison facility. COVID was quite challenging for UNODC in Uganda. We opened an office during the COVID pandemic, but we also had to support the response in prisons. Uganda had a very ambitious target to really ensure that the mortality rate in prison was at its minimum, and they achieved this. And many countries in the region are learning from Uganda. From our end, we really were in a position to support to the basic minimum the ability for prisoners to have continued access to justice, to have interaction with their communities, to have a semblance of a healthy life within a pandemic. So we invested in procuring video conferencing facilities for the critical high volume prisons, and this has become a standard because the cost of transferring prisoners to the court is quite high. And with video conferencing equipment, it's become the standard that you can actually save costs. And this is working very well. And prisoners actually now have confidence in the video conferencing facility and understand that they can get their due process. We also procured PPE, we also procured medical equipment, and we looked at improving sanitation within prison facilities. And to be honest, this was the biggest challenge of having an overcrowded setting and the potential of a catastrophe. But the mortality rates in Uganda were quite minimal. We also supported the prison staff clinics, but our biggest achievement was the joint effort to get prisoners vaccinated. You will note from the screen that with support from the Norwegian government, the US government, and the Multi-Partner Trust Fund in Uganda, we managed to vaccinate over 11,000 prisoners. We also were able to vaccinate over 600 staff and at least 400 family members. This was quite helpful for us to ensure that the aspect of leave no one behind really extends to the prison community. And this covered 29 prison facilities in 3 regions of the country. So this was quite supportive from the government. We continue to bring the agenda of the Nelson Mandela rules within government structures. We're well integrated. We're working closely with the UN family, and we're working with civil society to ensure that the critical priority of having prisoners included within the justice sector and the necessary reforms are well integrated in priority setting post-COVID, and also depending on some of the issues that may arise. Allow me to just thank the existing partners to Uganda who have supported our work, but also just to give you an opportunity to hear from the member state. I'm not sure how quick the video will be. If I'm looking at my colleague Philip, if we can still listen in. But we thought we needed to give you this assurance that yes, the practical applicability of the Nelson Mandela rules can happen, and where partners come together, government, ourselves, and civil society, it is possible. And so at this point, let me just give you a short video. Thank you.
one of the bigger risks that we see in Uganda is that you have so many people in pre-trial detention who are on remand before coming to trial for years.
I think this is so welcome, and we believe it will help so much in the problem at hand.
With support from UNODC, we rejoice to have undertaken an e-learning course for 97 cadet ASPs, a range of capacity building workshops for our correctional officers, and incorporated Mandela rules into our human rights curriculum module. This has resulted into better treatment of inmates, improved prison conditions, strong rehabilitation and reintegration mechanisms, and has inspired the development of prison management information system to enhance the registration of inmates and their records.
The much celebrated Mandela rules have contributed to the transformation of Uganda prison service from a punitive to a much more correctional institution. And human-based practices that have been adopted include proper ventilation for wards, proper hygiene, and these other rehabilitation programs that have been put in place have helped to contribute to the reduction in recidivism in Uganda prison service to about 20%, making Uganda prison service the best in Africa.
UNODC has collaborated with us and has so far provided us support, and we have reached out to 3 regions out of the 16 regions, and we are planning to reach out to the remaining 13 regions. And this will not stop until actually the country achieves over 95% of vaccination at the level which we assume that now we're experiencing or benefiting from herd immunity.
The main objective of UPS is safety and security, of which health comes under this objective. That is provision of access to medical attention for prisoners, staff, and the public. Without good health for both staff and prisoners, we will have failed our vision and mission as UPS.
Uganda Prison Service is now in a position, first of all, of understanding these violent extremist prisoners. We are also in a position of trying to engage them, rehabilitate them, and then finally, after their sentences, we hope to resettle them very well.
Most of the sharing that we've had on this round table tells me actually how much we've done as Uganda Prison Service and how much more we can actually do. The treatment programs, the psychological aspect of it, the cognitive behavioral therapies that we need to actually incorporate in our work is actually very, very good for us, and personally, I can't wait to actually put this in my programs.
Upload the Nelson Mandela Rule.
impressive. Thank you, Mr. Nyambi, for this impressive account of your work in Uganda. And I want to acknowledge as well the willingness of the states to address their problems, not to hide them, but to look for a solution together with UNODC. I guess your work, it exemplifies, in my view, how UNODC can, and so many different fronts, make a positive change in prisons and contribute to addressing systematic prison challenges. I guess this inspiring example that illustrates what can be done if resources are made available and a solid partnership with national authorities is built. In this context, once again, thank you to Uganda as well. With this last presentation, I would like to thank all panelists, and I'm pleased to now open the floor to representatives from permanent missions, with a kind request for delegations to raise your plates if you would like to make a contribution. And let me start with those member states who would like to join the group of friends. Thank you for the step, in your interest, in our interest, and as an encouraging example for your neighboring states. First, the floor may be to Mr. Ambassador Philbert Abaka Johnson from the Permanent Mission of Ghana to the UN. Thanks for being with us.
Co-chairs, Executive Director Gadewali, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On the occasion of this year's Nelson Mandela International Day, permit me, on behalf of the Republic of Ghana, to congratulate the co-chairs of the group, South Africa and Germany, and the UNODC for the organization of this event. We are also grateful to the Executive Director, Gadewali, for a strong leadership in ensuring that member states embrace the Nelson Mandela rules. This event is an appropriate event in commemorating Nelson Mandela International Day. For many of us, we can only imagine the inhumane and horrendous experience of Madiba in his 27 years prison journey from Pretoria through Robben Island, Portsmouth to Victor Verster Prison. What we are doing today is to keep alive Madiba's values and dedicated service, particularly in promoting and protecting human rights and uplifting the poor, the vulnerable, and the underdeveloped. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, the decision for Ghana to join the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela rules is based on our values. These values are entrenched in the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, which, among others, forbid the violation of the dignity of all persons, whether free, arrested, restricted, or detained. Our Constitution also disallows inhumane treatment or punishment and conditions likely to detract from the dignity and worth of the human being. For this reason, Ghana is deploying efforts to strengthen the compliance of its prison service based on the Nelson Mandela rules with technical assistance of the UNODC. The aim of the ongoing project is to strengthen the capacity of the Ghana Prison Service to ensure the safe, secure, and humane custody of prisoners. In full alignment with the 10-year strategic plan 2015 to 2025, the project is supporting Ghana to achieve the following three objectives. One, improving prisons conditions, including accommodation, health, and basic services. Developing a refined classification tool that categorizes prisoners as per individually assessed risk and needs. And three, implementing a sustainable and effective rehabilitation programs for prisoners. A new draft prison bill inspired by the Nelson Mandela rules, which would replace the old Act of 1972, and note 1972, has been presented to the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General's Office for consideration. 2 additional drafts for a community service bill and parole regulations implementing non-custodial measures aimed at decongesting the country's prisons are also under active consideration. In closing, it is my fervent hope that our membership of the Group of Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules and cooperation in this enterprise will contribute in yielding manifold dividends in our quest to preserve the dignity and worth of prisoners who continue to be part of our society. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I now give the floor to my colleague, Ambassador Khairat Umarov, Kazakhstan.
Distinguished co-chairs of the group, my dear colleagues, Ambassador Schmidt-Bremmer of Germany and Ambassador Molikane of South Africa. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to commemorate the International Day of Outstanding Figure of our time, Nobel Prize winner Nelson Mandela. His role as a staunch advocate for justice and freedom is very much appreciated in Kazakhstan. It is my pleasure to inform you on this special occasion that my country has decided to join the group of friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules. Since 2018, a lot has been done within the framework of the UNODC program on supporting the management of violent extremist prisoners and the prevention of radicalization in prisons, which became possible thanks to the general financial contribution from the European Union and the Netherlands. More than 3,500 Kazakh law enforcement officers have benefited from the online courses on the Nelson Mandela Rules. Another 10 in-person training sessions were held covering more than 700 officers. In the future, we are hoping to cover all employees of the penal enforcement system. In November 2021, the first scientific and educational center for the Nelson Mandela Rules was opened in Kostanay Academy of the Ministry of Interior of Kazakhstan. As noted by the head of the academy, knowledge of the norms of international law is fundamental for the protection of human rights and freedoms of the convicted persons. Distinguished friends and colleagues, I would like to highlight another UNODC project on supporting the police reform in Kazakhstan, carried out with the financial support from the USA. Over the course of 2 years, UNODC has been conducting seminars and workshops for our law enforcement agencies on capacity building and community policing. These efforts are part of the wider reforms in the political, law enforcement, and prison systems, which Kazakhstan has been consistently adopting in the last 30 years as an independent country. I would like to thank Madam Gadavali for supporting projects and programs in our region, including the UNODC program for Central Asia and the regional program for Afghanistan and neighboring countries, and paying a visit to Central Asia in November-December last year. Strengthening cooperation with international organizations and foreign partners remains a priority for our country. Allow me to reiterate Kazakhstan's strive to work together to achieve a fairer world for all of us. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I understand that now our colleague from Uganda online will join us. Can we have a try at it?
Thank you, Chair. I hope that you...
Is Nyakato? It's you?
Thank you, Chair.
Fine.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me. The permanent mission of the Republic of Uganda would like to express its gratitude to the Executive Director of the UNODC and the staff of UNODC, and to you, Chair, and the co-chair of the group of Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules, as well as the group of Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules for this excellent work that you've been doing so far, as well as inviting us to join you in celebrating the Nelson Mandela Day and the Nelson Mandela Rules. We'd also like to join the Republic of South Africa and the rest of the world to celebrate the rich legacy that Nelson Mandela handed down to us. Chair, the Republic of Uganda has partnered and collaborated with various state and non-state actors in corrections on the national, regional, and international landscape to improve the living conditions of prisoners, with particular emphasis on upholding the rights of prisoners as well as recognizing their human dignity. It is in that regard that Uganda invited the Office of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to come to Uganda and partner with us and support us to champion reforms to transform the prisons in Uganda from penal to full correction centers. In this regard, we would like to express our gratitude to the UNODC for the wonderful work that they have done with the Republic of Uganda and that has been showcased in the presentation of Sharon Yambi. I would like to say that the interventions have positioned Uganda among the leaders in prisons and penal reforms on the African continent. In 1996, Uganda held an international seminar on prison conditions in Africa, and it is at that meeting that the Kampala Declaration on Prison Conditions in Africa was adopted. This declaration seeks to ensure the human rights of prisoners and recognizes and enhances the role of non-governmental agencies in the promotion of all rights of prisoners. Most importantly, the Kampala Declaration sought to emphasize that the conditions in which prisoners are held and the prison regulations should not aggravate the suffering that is already caused by the loss of liberty. Therefore, it is in this regard, and it's against this background, that Uganda would like to express its interest, its intention, and its commitment to join the group of the Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules, and we believe that this partnership and membership will strengthen our commitment to prisons and penal reforms in Africa, aimed at upholding the rights of prisoners at all times, as stated in the number of national and international protocols. I thank you once again, Chair, for having invited us for this day and for having enabled us to participate in this discussion. We look forward to being members of the group of Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's good. May I now ask the member states that would like to take the floor? With an impressive list of intervenients, I'd like to ask you to keep it short. And especially if you have a prolonged intervention worth being studied, I'd encourage you to hand it over to UNODC, and we'll find a way to make it available to all of you. Algérie, chers collègues, je vous prie de prendre la parole.
Thank you very much. First of all, of course, I align myself on the previous speakers in congratulating the Executive Director, both of you co-chairs, South Africa, ambassadors of South Africa and Germany, the all staff of UNODC, and of course the two excellent moderators for the interesting presentations. Allow me to express on behalf of my delegation the great honor of Algeria to attend this important ceremony to celebrate Nelson Mandela International Day, the greatest ambassador of human dignity and an African icon. He devoted his whole life to fight discrimination and to defend social justice and freedom. His courage, his engagement, and his struggle become an ideals to all peoples in the world. I would like also to avail myself of this occasion to recall the close relations that link Mandela to my country. When he returned to Algiers in 1990, in his first visit abroad after his release, Mandela attested, "The Algerian army made me a man." We are so proud for this attestation. And he recognized and appreciated Algeria's support during his long walk to freedom. Every year, Algeria celebrates the birthday of this eminent African and international personality to salute his journey as an activist in the defense of human rights and the fight against racism and all kinds of racial discrimination. It is very important to mention that Algeria was inspired by the struggle of this outstanding leader and the Nelson Mandela rules to improve the penitentiary system and the conditions of detention. In this regard, we welcome the existing cooperation with UNODC in this field and reaffirm my country's readiness to share its proven expertise in the modernization of penitentiary systems. Finally, allow me to reiterate the full adhesion and support of Algeria to the group of friends of Nelson Mandela rules in favor of the improvement of detention conditions in accordance with the United Nations standard minimum rules. What we watched on the screen presented by the moderator from Uganda shows that it's very important work made in respecting the Mandela rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ambassador Ojeda, Uruguay, please.
Thank you very much. Distinguished co-chairs of the group, excellencies, staff of United Nations Organization for Drug and Crime. On the occasion of this important day and recognizing the legacy of Nelson Mandela, Uruguay reiterates its commitment to increase efforts in the practical application of the Nelson Mandela rules, seeking to improve the situation of inmates and those who work in prisons. Uruguay, as part of the group of Friends of Nelson Mandela rules, understands that the United Nations minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners are a fundamental basis for the main purposes of prisons, such as the rehabilitation and social reintegration of prisoners, their re-education and crime prevention, and in no case, the application of the death penalty. Prison policies must be part of the social policies at all levels of government, with a gender perspective, requiring also the interaction with the academy and civil society. For a prison to be humane, dignified, and rehabilitative, there should be an interaction between two dimensions of the basic requirements. One has to do with the physical use of penitentiary units, and the others with the so-called treatment, that is the way in which relationship of coexistence and treatment are established between those deprived of liberty and the state represented by its officials. Treatment, social rehabilitation, and rehabilitation are all terms that point at the same thing, the generation of a process by which the prisoner can return to society without falling into new crimes. Therefore, the respect for dignity is the presence of treatment, and treatment is the exercise of rights, which means taking the person as an integrity and the development of the potential throughout life. This refers to an enormous variety of dimensions, many of them referring to his own abilities, another to the relational aspects, relations with others, with society, with the state, and with the environment. Treatment for reintegration means a life as similar as possible to the outside world,
which constitutes the principle of normalization established in the Mandela rules. The more similar the prison coexistence is to life outside prison, with work, health, education, recreation, family, and communication, the more likely that the person will develop humanly and not to resort to violence again. There are still many challenges to overcome, and we all have a part in the process. We can do something about it in order to allow prisoners to return to life in society in harmony while assuming responsibilities and obligation with others and towards society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now give the floor to Switzerland. Ambassador Negeli, bitte.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Switzerland welcomes the holding of this meeting of the Group of Friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules and thanks the co-chairs from Germany and from South Africa for the invitation. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought back into the spotlight the specific vulnerabilities of persons deprived of their liberty and the need for states to improve the prison conditions. Today's International Mandela Day reminds us of how important it is to continue our common commitment towards humane conditions of imprisonment. Switzerland is proud to take part in the Group of Friends' efforts to promote the application of the Nelson Mandela Rules worldwide and are grateful to celebrate this important day with you. Given their universally acknowledged status as minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners, the implementation of the Mandela Rules and their incorporation into national legislation is more pressing than ever. It is with great interest that we have listened to the elaborations of Professor Van Zyl-Smit in this regard, as well as to the account of Mrs. Nyambe on the tangible impact that prison reforms can have. Moreover, Switzerland welcomes the tireless efforts of the UNODC towards turning the important safeguards for prisoners contained in the Nelson Mandela Rules into actual practice. We therefore greatly appreciate and support today's launch of the UNODC's toolkit on the Nelson Mandela Rules. My country joins these efforts by constantly working towards a better implementation of the Mandela Rules in its prisons and places of detention. As you may know, Switzerland has a federal system, which means that the regulation of the concrete modalities of detention lies primarily with the responsibility of the 26 cantons. This implies that the organization, infrastructure, and resources in Swiss prisons can be quite disparate. In order to support and facilitate the exchanges of best practices between the cantons, as well as the strategic planning and development of the correctional system, the Swiss Center of Expertise in Prison and Probation was founded. Since its creation in 2018, the center has given valuable inputs regarding the improvement of prison conditions. For example, they published a handbook on psychiatric care in prisons in 2021. This handbook is intended for heads of service and prison managers and aims to promote discussions to ensure optimal care and effective crisis management in the context of psychiatric care in prisons. Another valuable effort towards the promotion and implementation of the Mandela Rules in Switzerland was undertaken by the Swiss Center of Expertise in Human Rights. In September 2020, the center has published a study on the practice of cantonal correctional authorities and their conformity with specific Nelson Mandela Rules, combining their findings with concrete recommendations. We encourage all countries to undertake similar evaluations. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's theme for the Nelson Mandela International Day is "Do what you can with what you have, wherever you are." We believe that the UNODC toolkit of the Nelson Mandela Rules distributed today is a very valuable addition to the tools that states have in order to maximize what they can do to improve the prison conditions in their respective jurisdictions. Switzerland looks forward to continue its efforts in this regards, and we invite all of you to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. May I now ask Thailand Ambassador Sriswasti to come in?
Thank you very
very much, distinguished co-chairs and distinguished participants. It gives me a pleasure to join all of you today in remembering the great life of the late President Nelson Mandela through the promotion of the implementation of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the treatment of prisoners, or the Nelson Mandela Rules. I also would like to thank all the panelists for your very informative and very interesting presentations, and especially the launch of these toolkits is very useful. Thailand is one of the first countries in the world to officially implement the Nelson Mandela Rules by annexing elements from the rules into the newly promulgated Corrections Act, and the development of the remand prison as a pilot prison of Nelson Mandela Rules in 2017. Up until today, the Corrections Department has been placing the Nelson Mandela Rules among the top of their agenda. And we worked with our partners, particularly Thailand Institute of Justice and the UNODC, to continuously improve the conditions of its correctional facilities and uphold the rights of the prisoners, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. During those COVID-19 pandemic, we have the standard operation procedures for healthcare in prisons that have been launched, and together with the Good Health and Good Heart project, graciously introduced by His Majesty the King, and the vaccination campaign, we managed to reduce the seriousness of the COVID-19 in prisons, and the death rate in the prisons, it's lower than the general population. We also developed correctional facilities in the central part and in the north and in the south as a pilot prisons where Nelson Mandela Rules are put into practice. We continue to carry out the renovation of our correction facilities to increase the space and reduce overcrowding of facilities throughout the country. We continue to promote the rehabilitation program for inmates, offering occupational training based on their skills and interests. We do what we can, and the industrial estate, a joint project by Ministry of Justice in collaboration with private sector to create jobs with those recently released, has just been launched in the one of the province in the Eastern Economic Corridor. We continue to work with our partners to offer regular training courses to our officers. The latest in-person course was held in March this year. The e-learning courses are also available. Additionally, forums, seminars are regularly held to promote the exchange of best practice with our partners, and we would like to offer cooperation and share our best practices with other member states as well. Despite our best efforts to implement the Nelson Mandela Rules as well as the Bangkok Rules, challenges remain, especially in the capacity of the correctional facility infrastructures, the capacity of correctional officers, and after all, limited budget. Hence, the international cooperation, technical assistance remain crucial. In this regard, we appreciate the cooperation with and assistance from international partners and recognize the launch of the toolkits today as another important step towards our goal and our goal of full and effective implementation of the rules worldwide. I'm very happy that in the toolkit, the documents here mention a lot of rules from the Bangkok rules that we are implementing in Thailand as well. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Thailand, and congratulations for your successes. Mexico, please.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and thank you very much to both co-chairs, ambassadors of Germany and South Africa. Congratulations for such an important event, which allows us to pay homage to the great Nelson Mandela, Madiba. This event is without a doubt an opportunity that allows us to raise awareness on the topic of greater relevance, to encourage humane conditions of imprisonment, to promote consciousness about prisoners being a continuous part of society, and to value the work of prison staff as a social service of particular importance. In this light, the Bangkok Rules, the Mandela Rules, and the Kyoto Rules seek to improve the conditions of people in penitentiary settings as to incorporate a gender perspective in criminal justice systems, particularly when it comes to the development and application of appropriate and effective policies and plans to achieve law enforcement and the advancement of criminal justice institutions at all levels. Prisons need to be managed within a framework guided by international standards to protect the human rights of prisoners and treat them without discrimination. It is also important that we continue strengthening the capacity of criminal justice institutions to ensure the use of alternative measures to incarceration and to promote restorative justice. In this vein, we would like to highlight the importance of delivering mental health and psychosocial support services, both for prisoners and for prison staff. Training and capacity for managers and leaders must include mental health and psychological support services in order for them to be mentally fit to treat prisoners with dignity, respect, and consideration. Nonetheless, let us also not forget that it is equally important that we keep on striving to improve prison management so that it focuses on the social reintegration of incarcerated persons. By reintegrating persons who have been released from prison back into society, we will strengthen our communities and reduce crime and recidivism. We welcome the efforts by member states, by UNODC, and by civil society partners, and look forward to continuing working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now let's turn to your neighbor, United States, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon and welcome to our new members today. The United States strongly supports the Nelson Mandela Rules as a critical framework for ensuring humane treatment for incarcerated individuals. As the rules underscore, all incarcerated individuals deserve basic human rights and opportunities for hope and change. The United States applies these Mandela Rules when advancing cooperation with foreign partners as we work together on corrections issues. They are the gold standard for prison reform efforts worldwide and help nations, including the United States, to focus on training, technical assistance, and other broad capacity building efforts. As we know too well, ineffective, corrupt, or inhumane correctional systems can contribute to crime by enabling criminal organizations, activities, and enterprises, including serving as a breeding ground for recruits for criminal and terrorist activity. Consistent with the Mandela Rules, the United States is undertaking important criminal justice system reforms with a focus on improving prisons. Evidence of President Biden's recent action on this topic is an executive order on law enforcement, which also promotes evidence-based rehabilitation programming for prisoners, reduction of unfair and disparate barriers to successful reentry into society, and reduced recidivism rates of persons released from prison. U.S. foreign assistance programming is designed to build the capacities of international correction systems to operate safe, secure, and humane environments, including in the areas of institutional security, staff training, prisoner classification, and education and treatment to support adherence to the minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. In the spirit of the Mandela Rules, as we continue to work with foreign partners to strengthen the rule of law globally, the United States will continue to support UNODC's Dignity Unlocked awareness campaign and advocate for global action to preserve human dignity in prisons at a time of urgent need. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. And now may I ask Namibia to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it is a great honor to join the co-chairs to celebrate Nelson Mandela International Day. Through this, Mr. Chair, Namibia, through the Namibian Correctional Services, recognizes that efforts to improve and maintain compliance to the Nelson Mandela Rules can bring with it positive changes such as better interpersonal relationships between officers and offenders, institutional peace, and an environment conducive to rehabilitation, and perceives the implementation of the Nelson Mandela Rules as a key performance indicator in realizing its vision to be Africa's leader in the provision of correctional services. Mr. Chair, accordingly, the NCS has incorporated the Nelson Mandela rules in its strategic planning with different focal areas identified for implementation. Correctional policies also make provisions for delivering services in line with the requirements of the Nelson Mandela rules. The education of correctional officers on the Nelson Mandela rules has also been accepted as integral to ensuring compliance to the rules. And to this end, 45 correctional officers have thus far received training as trainers of trainers on the Nelson Mandela rules. Since 2018, 394 officers have been trained on the Nelson Mandela rules, whereas various sensitizing campaigns involving inmates and officers have also been conducted on the Nelson Mandela rules. A total of 1,458 offenders have been sensitized this far, whereas 126 correctional officers have also participated in such campaigns. Mr. Chair, notwithstanding the above successes, we still face challenges in terms of compliance with some elements of the rules, which include insufficient space at existing correctional facilities, making it difficult to some specifications to the rules, lack of correctional facilities in all regions to address Rule 59, which requires offenders to be accommodated close to their homes, and delays in the provision of some of the basic needs to inmates. We hope that these challenges can be addressed through collaboration with all relevant stakeholders. Mr. Chair, we also would like to take this opportunity to welcome the new members, Uganda, Ghana, and Kazakhstan, to the group of friends, and we further look forward to the expansion of the group. Finally, Namibia welcomes the launch of the UNODC toolkit on the Nelson Mandela rules, and to this end would like to also take this opportunity to thank the UNODC in all its support through our collaboration with the Namibian Correctional Services, and we look forward to expanding and looking at new areas of cooperation. I thank you, sir.
Thank you. And as last of the member states now, Austria, please.
Thank you so much, distinguished co-chairs, Excellency, panelists, dear colleagues. We thank you for organizing this meeting on the occasion of today's Nelson Mandela International Day. Austria commends the active work of UNODC and a group of friends to create awareness and to promote the practical application of the Nelson Mandela rules. We would like to thank Executive Director Geda Wally for her efforts and commend UNODC's toolkit as an important further step in this regard. Furthermore, we would also like to thank the other panelists for their interesting insight and presentations. Austria attaches great importance to the promotion of the humane condition of imprisonment and the application of the Nelson Mandela rules. In particular, the UNODC interactive e-learning course serves as an important tool to provide assistance in understanding and applying these rules. In this regard, the Austrian Prison Service Academy has successfully integrated UNODC's interactive e-learning course into the training and educational program for Austrian prison guards. Since the beginning of this year, all prison guards need to complete UNODC's e-learning course within their one-year training period. This should not only promote understanding and application, but also foster thematic exchange on this subject. In addition, the Academy also offers mandatory advanced training concerning human rights to prison staff. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now I can come to Palestine. Ambassador Abdel Shafi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Distinguished co-chairs, excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is indeed a great privilege to take part in this important event, to honor the legacy of this towering figure of history, particularly as Palestinians. We had a special relationship with Nelson Mandela and to the people of South Africa. I remember in 1997, Mandela, in observing the International Day of the Solidarity with the Palestinian people, said in his speech, and I quote, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people." And for that, we will never forget Nelson Mandela. But honoring the legacy of Nelson Mandela has never been as relevant as it is today. Because Nelson Mandela's, to honor his legacy, is not only to implement the Mandela rules related to prisoners, but also to take his principles and values as a whole. Today, in a world where we see that international law and international humanitarian law is being dealt with in a pick and choose manner, as if it was a menu, it is very important to look at Nelson Mandela's legacy as a whole. But part of our efforts to honor his legacy was to join at an early stage the group of the Friends of the Mandela Rules, and to participate in all relevant UNODC programs, particularly the rehabilitation program. And I would like to take this opportunity to extend our gratitude for UNODC for the support that they have been providing Palestine, my country, in training and technical assistance. Our dilemma, ladies and gentlemen, is that the vast majority of our prisoners are not in Palestinian national prisons. They are in the prisons of a foreign occupying power, Israel. Just to give you some examples, alone in this year, since January of this year, more than 3,500 Palestinians were arrested. Among them, 1,300 children. Still in Israeli jails of this year, we have more than 200 children under the age of 18. We have 243 prisoners that have been in jail for more than 20 years. Among them, 8 prisoners for more than 35 years. This is the sad reality. When we are calling for the dignity of individuals, there is no dignity for individuals when the dignity of nations is not being respected. I would like to close by reaffirming our commitment to the implementation of Mandela rules in cooperation with UNODC, at least in the prisons, or what we call them, the correction centers that lie under the authority of my government. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I now give the floor to the Interparliamentarian Union, Ambassador Brenner, please.
I'm sorry, Ambassador Brenner had to leave, but thank you for giving the floor to the Interparliamentary Union, the global organization of parliaments. The IPU and its Human Rights Committee intensely use the Nelson Mandela rules. Due to time restraints, however, we will submit our statement in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we're a little bit late, but nevertheless, I guess we should listen still to UNODC's HIV unit. Mrs. Soltani, please.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Thank you for giving us the floor. Just to compliment my colleagues, Philip and Sharon's presentation on the excellent work that they're doing, that we are very much collaborating with. And just to give you a little, just very short explanation about the work that we are doing. So, as pointed out by Professor Van Zyl-Smith, the Article 19 to 21 of the Nelson Mandela Rules are focusing on prisoners' right to health. And within the UNAIDS Joint Program on HIV, UNODC is the lead agency for addressing HIV/AIDS prevention, treatment, testing, and care among people in prisons and other closed settings. Last year, we developed a global report representing recent epidemiological data and service coverage on HIV in prisons, as well as UNODC's support in addressing HIV, tuberculosis, viral hepatitis, and COVID-19 in prisons. In December 2021, UNODC introduced this report to the UNAIDS Program Coordinating Board which calls on member states to introduce and scale up programmatic actions and increase resources for HIV-related services in prisons. Noting that the HIV prevalence is 6 times higher among people in prisons than adults in the general population, and even higher among women than men in prisons, CCPCJ adopted Resolution 26/2 in response, and UNO, which is ensuring access to measures for the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV in prisons. And in response, together with our partners, we have developed technical guides as well as a monitoring tool for mother-to-child transmission of HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis B in prisons, and the availability of services to prevent such transmission. To date, we have managed to build skills and capacities of over 350 national policymakers, prison authorities, and staff and healthcare providers, and relevant civil society organizations in ensuring access to comprehensive HIV care for people in prisons, with a focus on women and sexual and reproductive health via many regional trainings, including in our 35 high-priority countries. We very much look forward to working with all the friends of the Nelson Mandela Rules, and I would like to take this opportunity of thanking Germany for supporting us with funding to ensure the continuity of HIV work during the COVID response, which actually resulted in much of the good work that is happening in Uganda. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you for my part. We are now on the last stretch. First, let me reiterate and come back to the idea of IPU to present your papers to the UNODC to discuss it, to have it studied. And another point, lead by example. If you want to give a good example, a good precedent, show that you make the difference, that you in your countries be an example for good handling of the situation in the facilities. And just as a short wrap-up, the time is running out and the reception is waiting for us. What I learned is the appalling figure of detainees not yet sentenced, 30 to 50%. And in this context, one has to get the impression that the criminal system is used and sometimes misused to clear the street without having really the idea of a correctional system, but just to keep them locked away. And that's, once again, is the abuse of the criminal and the criminal proceedings. And this is a point I have learned, I take with me, and be assured that you can count on Germany in the future as well, that we, together with South Africa, we are working in this field to make the world, in those places, difficult places, a better world. Thank you. Dear colleague, may I ask you to take back the floor?
Thank you very much, Chair. And also in the interest of time, we thank the UNODC, Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice for launch of the toolkit. And we also welcome new members, Ghana, Kazakhstan, and Uganda, and assure them of our continued support in the practical implementation of the rules. And we also take this opportunity to encourage other members to consider joining the group. It is a very important group, and we will value your support. In concluding, Chair, we also, as we move forward, we must tackle the root causes of incarceration and mainstream the standards and norms on crime prevention and criminal justice. Most importantly, we must deal with and banish conditions that give rise to crime and strive to create a world that Nelson Mandela envisioned. Thank you very much, and you are all invited to something to snack.
But before that, I ask and invite all participants to gather in front of the podium for a group for the famous family picture. Please get in, and then we'll follow our co-chair to his reception.